Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, retired librarian turned homeschool mom. And this is the 5th review and 6th video in my Harry Potter series. So I'm going to cover this thing. This is Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. I don't like this book. Of all the Harry Potter books, I don't like this book the most. This book at the end of it ended up in my closet. I hate this book. It's irritating. So before I get into this, and I say this at the beginning of all my book reviews when it comes to this, I did a whole other video ranting and raving about Rowling. Check that out. That's the beginning of this. The only thing I will say, and I say this at the beginning of every one of these, if you want to introduce these to your kids, if you don't already own them, which most people in my age group probably already do, your library has copies. They might even be selling copies. Used bookstores have copies. So buy them used, don't buy them new. One, there's no point. Two, don't support, Rowling and bigotry. We don't like Rowling and bigotry, but these are still decent books. So back to the point of this horrid mess. Now this book is the first book that came out after the films came out. So this is, it's probably the reason Rowling wasn't as careful. And this is irritating. So Harry Potter is 15 in this book. And he's basically turns into a dick. Harry Potter's character is, he's really, really obnoxious and really, really dumb in this book. He went from being a smart, nice, intelligent kid to being a 15-year-old moron. So, it's like he lost his sense. Because apparently he turned 15. I don't know if that's Rowling's experience with teenage boys. But apparently she thinks they all turned into dicks about 15. So, again, I don't like this book. A lot of people don't like this book. I will spoil it for people who've been living in a box. Sirius Black, who's one of a lot of people's favorite characters, Harry's godfather, dies in this book, at the end of this book, possibly due to Harry being an absolute utter moron and not trusting things and just being a douchebag. So let's do a brief overview. I have not read this book as much in detail because it gets very, very long and gets very, very tedious. So this is the overview, however. Harry is now 15. Voldemort has come back. It starts off with him as usual at the Dursleys, trying to figure out what's going on. Nobody tells him anything all summer. So Voldemort comes back, and I believe it's the end of sometime in June. When school ends. I can't remember, I have no idea. It may be the end of May. But essentially, he's been with the Dursleys 4 months after experiencing Cedric Diggory's death, winning the Triwizard Tournament, and Voldemort coming back and nearly killing him. So, yeah, he's pissed off because nobody will tell him anything. And so Harry's he's hanging about. He's listening to the news. His aunt and uncle have no idea what the heck is going on. They know he's prissy, but and they're spoiling their only son, who is acting like a sweet little boy and pretending to go off to tea while he hangs out with his friends and smokes and drinks and beats people up. Yeah, Dudley went from being big, fat, and irritating to just a giant bully. If he wasn't that already, now he's just no longer that fat. So eventually what happens is Harry's wandering around the streets. He sees his cousin kind of hanging out with his friends, kind of teases him a little bit, and then he goes off. I can't remember exactly where they are. They're in some sort of tunnel, and Dementors show up. Harry freaks out. He has his wand on him. He uses a Patronus and makes them go away, and then his crazy old little neighbor shows up and starts dragging them down the street because his cousin's experience. He doesn't see anything, but he feels like he's freezing, and eventually all the wonderful things in his spoiled little life have disappeared. So Fig, who's been briefly mentioned, shows up, drags them back where they're supposed to be, back to Harry's aunts and uncle's place, tells Harry to stay in the house, and continues to rant and rave about some wizard who was supposed to be there, and he's trying to get information. So essentially then his aunt and uncle try to throw him out, and then an owl arrives with a howler. Now the howlers are basically letters that will scream at you, essentially, and explode if you don't open them. And all this one is, it's actually to his Aunt Petunia, and it says, "Remember my last." So this is some sort of reference to a letter that we kind of find out later that Dumbledore left with Harry when he was a baby, telling Petunia something. We're not quite sure at this point. We do later find out that the reason Harry has to stay with his aunt and uncle is because his mother's blood, and that kind of protects him from Voldemort. So he has to stay there. So at first he's going to be expelled, and he's not, and everybody's basically a bunch of owls telling him to go, to stay, to behave, and that he's going to be expelled, that he's not going to be expelled, that there's going to end up being a tribunal. So, yeah, Harry gets really upset, and his aunt pretty much locks him in his room because somehow she's terrified, obviously, of Dumbledore. We find that more out in book 6. A lot more backstory in that book. But nonetheless, Harry's stuck, hangs out for a while. Then I'm trying to think. Harry is... How is he picked up on this one? It's been a long time since I've read this book. I'm pretty sure... No, Dumbledore comes to pick him up in book 6. I'm trying to think. How is he... He says... No, I think Dumbledore does come grab him. Harry, yeah, Dumbledore comes and grabs him in this book and takes him to Grimmauld Place. So, which is where the Order of the Phoenix is. So he's brought, or no, it's not Dumbledore. What is it? Who on earth brings him to Grimmauld Place? I actually have to look. It's been so long, and I've only read this book maybe once or twice. So now I'm having to look at this. So this is the Pack of Owls. And eventually, who the heck comes and grabs him from his aunt and uncle? Let's see. I believe it is... Yes, this is the Advanced Guard. Okay, so a bunch of people come get him. So that's when this happens. This is the Advanced Guard issue. So, basically who shows up to grab him? No, Hedwig does not die in this. It's a bunch of people from the Order of the Phoenix. So this is where you meet the real Alistair Booby, as well as Kingsley Skybold, who are both R's. And then, what on earth? I cannot remember her name at the moment. Nymphadora shows up. I think there's a few other people who are there. Along with Lupin is with them. And essentially, they come and escort Harry back to where the Order of the Phoenix is staying. So, basically, I think it's about 5. So they come, they have sent the Dursleys off to some fake thing recommending their house. And they come and they take Harry through roundabout ways on broomsticks to Grimmauld Place, which is where the Order of the Phoenix is staying. It's also Sirius's family home that he inherited because, you know, his little brother was killed by Voldemort. You find that about more, I believe, in the 6th book. Yeah. Things are, and so they're basically, he finds Sirius, who's miserable because he's stuck in the family home. He hates his family. They're Slytherins. They were more aligned, similar to the Malfoys, old purebloods, and Severus was in the House of Gryffindor. And he hated his parents and I think moved out when he was like 16. So he's stuck in a house that he hates with pictures of his mother who's periodically screaming because she hates the people in the house. So Harry's brought there. Again, they have some sort of meeting, including with Severus Snape, and of course they're not telling Harry absolutely anything. And Harry gets pissed off, and he kind of yells at his friends, Ron and Hermione there, as well as the twins, and Ginny Weasley, who's obviously little sister. And he yells at them, and he's like, we can't tell you. Dumbledore, we were under orders not to say anything. And he's still kind of pissed off. So that's the first thing. The time before they go to school is spent. Harry has to go to some strange tribunal where you meet probably the most despicable person next to Voldemort, if not more than Voldemort, in the entire book series. Dolores Umbridge, who becomes their defense against the dark arts teacher and is a horrible, horrible human being. She's the epitome of just kind of massive bigotry, which is now mirroring Rowling herself. Possibly self-reflection there. But essentially, Dumbledore defends him. It's like, no, he defended off Dementors, and Miss Fig shows up, and kind of Harry gets the understanding that bad things are happening and Fudge is trying to ignore them. And so basically Dumbledore is on the outs. A lot of people are, the Weasleys are kind of hiding in trouble. Percy has turned on his family. That's the other thing that happens in the beginning of this book. Both Fred and George Weasley are recruited and are working for the Order of the Phoenix, which originally in the previous war also contained both Harry's parents as well as Neville Longbottom's. So these were all people who were involved. The Weasleys were not originally involved. They didn't participate because partially the Ministry of Magic was against Voldemort in the first one. Now they're hiding from it. So, which is interesting. Nonetheless, they go back to school, and a lot of it is them dealing with Umbridge and basically oppression. Umbridge targets Harry. She kicks him off the Quidditch team. She eventually cancels the Quidditch team. She's teaching defense against the dark arts and basically making them write stuff, which is very, very boring. And she essentially, her one thing, which is horrible, Harry refuses to not admit that Voldemort exists. He also refuses to tell his other teachers that he's being tormented by this woman. His detention with her has him basically end up writing on his hand that he will not tell lies. So yeah, and everybody's going up against Dumbledore. Dumbledore is eventually kicked out of the school. Umbridge takes over because of Fudge, and she starts firing everybody, including their slightly crazy astronomy teacher. Hagrid isn't hanging around. He had gone off to recruit giants. He comes back. He deals with Umbridge. It's not a fun time, and that's the primarily things that are going on. They're dealing with Umbridge, and Voldemort has come back, and the Death Eaters are everywhere, and the Slytherins, and particularly like Malfoy, are showing off their new powers, because now they, basically Dumbledore is not really there through a lot of this book, and essentially Umbridge is supporting them, because of course, Umbridge actually, she's not evil in the sense that she's a brown noser similar to Percy. She is attracted to power, and she goes wherever the power is. She has no morals. She has no ethics. She has no conscience. She just cares about power. So she will stick with whoever is in power. She will sleep with whoever is in power to get her job. And I think that's implied in one of the shorter books that Rowling does. No, don't buy them. You might be able to find them used. I think they're mostly ebooks. They're stuff that was once upon a time on their website. I think a lot of it's gone now. But nonetheless, that's the majority of this book. It's very, very dark. It's very, very irritating. The only other good thing that's going on is Harry and his friends. Basically, Harry's very good at defense against the dark arts. He's had to. And his friends convince him to teach the others because they're not learning it in class. So he starts essentially becoming a teacher, and they form their own army of sorts called Dumbledore's Army, or the DA. This is also where you get more introductions to a woman character by the name of Luna Lovegood, who's a Ravenclaw who's kind of flighty. I think this is her first introduction. She's brought into this book. She's kind of teased a lot. Her father writes in the... Actually, she might show up in the fourth book. It's been a while when Luna shows up. But I'm pretty sure it's in the fifth book where she shows up because she can see... This is the first time Harry sees these the carriages that normally take the kids to the school, which you see occasionally because, again, second book, they crash into a Weeping Willow. So I'm trying to think. In the third and fourth book, they're brought to the school by these carriages. Well, in the 5th year, Harry can actually see what's pulling them, which are kind of skeletal horses, and most people can't see them. Luna Lovegood does, because they both witnessed a death, and that's how you see them. They're Thessals, is what they're called. And Luna eventually witnessed her mother accidentally kill herself by messing around with potions. So they can both see them. So he kind of bonds a little bit with slightly flighty Luna. And she becomes a major character to an extent. The DA, as they call it, eventually is run primarily. You get a lot more character development with both Ginny Weasley, Neville Longbottom, oddly enough, who starts becoming braver and is a much better wizard, and Luna. Those three kind of mirror, to an extent, Harry, Hermione, and Ron in this book. They slowly become major characters, and they become very, very important in book 7. So, particularly Ginny and Neville. So, essentially, you have the DA, and they're hiding from it's a representation of what happened with Hogwarts when it became a totalitarian regime similar to communism to an extent. Basically, everybody's hiding, and you have a lot of violence. So the schools that went from being a sanctuary to basically becomes a nightmare. And Harry, there's a few other issues where basically Sirius is depressed because he's stuck. He can't do anything because they're still hunting him and they'd kill him. So he's stuck at his parents' place being miserable. And Snape is rubbing it in his face a lot. So then I believe Harry is still kind of seeing Voldemort. He's being slightly tormented by Severus Snape himself because Dumbledore is ordered Snape to try to teach Harry how to block out his mind, essentially, because they don't want Voldemort kind of getting in there. And alchemy, I believe is what it's called. I'm probably mispronouncing this. And of course, Snape is using it to his advantage to torment Harry, because Snape hates Harry's father, and therefore Harry. And yet he has a love-hate relationship, because it turns out that Snape liked Lily Potter, who was Lily Evans, which is Harry's mother. So you find out a little bit more of the backstory there. You see Harry's father and Sirius being bullies to Snape, and then seeing a little bit more of that background. You find a lot more of that in the Half-Blood Prince. That's where that story comes in. But this is kind of the start of it. So essentially, it's a very depressing book. Mr. Weasley is is bit by a snake, and Harry kind of sees it, so they're able to rescue him. That's also when his friends find out about Neville's parents. Harry knew, I believe back in book 2, about Neville's parents, that they were in the hospital because they were Aurors and they were tortured. So, and the entire point of this story, this is the other thing that comes up, because they're in St. Mungo's, they find out about Neville's parents, essentially, who were crazy because they were tortured to insanity. But the other thing they become obsessed with is this prophecy, which supposedly prophesizes that Harry has to destroy Voldemort. This is something they've been talking about a little bit before. This is the first time you get to hear it. And it was given out by Sybil Tulny, probably mispronouncing her name, who was their, basically she's the one who tells the future. That's their teacher. She's kicked out by Umbridge. I believe you meet her in book 4. That's when she first shows up, I believe. Well, actually, no, she shows up in book 3. She's not in the book a lot. She prophesizes people's deaths all the time. She's wrong. She's only actually given 2 prophecies in her entire life. One was literally in book 3. The other one was this one before Harry was born. And they find out about this prophecy, and it's hidden, and Voldemort's trying to find it. All right, this book is very heavy. And what ends up happening, and this is kind of a spoiler, after all this stuff with Umbridge, They get Umbridge taken away because she's racist, um, and essentially they get her carried off by the centaurs. And then Harry believes that Sirius is in danger, and Sirius's house elf, who mainly belongs to Sirius's family and hates Sirius, lies to Harry because, as it turns out, Sirius is also not only related to Nymphadora through his cousin Andromeda, but Andromeda's sisters are not only Neville's mother, or not Neville's mother, Draco's mother, Narcissa, but also somebody else who's escapes prison, which is, why on earth can I not remember their names? But she has another sister who basically were the ones who tortured and murdered Neville's parents, and for some reason I can't remember their names at this moment because characters' names let's see if I can find where this happens. Let's see. Memories. This is near the end of the bloody book. Let's see. Here we go. The Department of Mysteries, which is where this happens, which is where they go because they're looking for the prophecy. And Voldemort shows up along with a bunch of other people, primarily people he's escaped from prison with. And let's see if I can find the name of the character. And this is the woman who kills Sirius, so to speak. Let's see. Where on earth is she? And why can't I remember her name? She's played by a very well-known actress. So let's here we go. Let's see. Where is he? Malfoy shows up. Let's see. What is her name? Here we go. See if I can find where this is. Death Eaters show up. Bellatrix. There we go. Bellatrix Lestrange. So she's actually, once again, Sirius's cousin. So kind of the climax of this story is Harry goes with his friends to the Department of Mysteries, which is in the Ministry of Magic, despite what his friends told him. Basically, he's being stubborn. And again, he wants to go by himself because he thinks he has to do this alone. His friends, including both Luna and Neville and Ginny, as well as Ron and Hermione, go with him. Becomes a mass disaster. They destroy a bunch of things. They get in a giant fight with a bunch of Death Eaters. Dumbledore shows up. Sirius dies because Sirius isn't actually there. He comes with a bunch of other people and eventually falls into a... Whether he's killed or not, essentially he dies. He's pushed into this behind the veil, is what they call it. So essentially he dies that way. Pushed essentially in a fight with Bellatrix. So Harry loses his godfather, which is one of the reasons a lot of people, myself included, hate this book, because they start killing off Harry's mentors. And essentially the prophecy is destroyed. And it kind of ends there. You find out what the prophecy is because the only other person who knows it is Dumbledore, because he's the one who heard it. And that's how Ptolemy gets her job at the school anyway. And it actually doesn't, it's one of those things where it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. She tells it, Snape is actually there in the bar where Dumbledore hears it, but he doesn't hear the entire thing because he's thrown out. So let me see if I can pull up that prophecy here, because it is very interesting. And that's novels. Let's see. Mind you, this is also the book where Ron ends up on the Quidditch team and being very good at it, and Harry starts dating Ginny Weasley near the end. So let's see, where is that prophecy? You gotta always love when they put prophecies into these books. Beyond the Veil, there we go. Let's see. And of course, it ends with Dumbledore getting back and Umbridge going away. So, and of course, Voldemort's still terrified of Dumbledore, because Dumbledore is the only person who ever defeated him. There we go, the Lost Prophecy. Where is that prophecy here? It's been a long time. Again, I don't like this book, so I read the first 4 a couple of times. This one I rarely ever read. So, let's see, here it is. Okay, so this is the prophecy directly from the book. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies, and the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal. But he will have power the Dark Lord knows not, and either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord will be born as the 7th month dies. So that's what it provides. It doesn't entirely name Harry. Voldemort just assumes it's Harry. This is what Dumbledore explains. It actually describes 2 little boys. Neville Longbottom's the other one. So it describes both Harry and Neville. His parents, both of them had parents have fought and survived Voldemort 3 times. Both of them were born at the end of July. But Voldemort chose Harry. So that's the thing that Dumbledore explains. Voldemort chose his fate. He went after Harry. Harry's mother died to save him, basically, because of love. And that's the entire weird thing that's running through these books. Love is the most powerful thing in all the world, apparently. A mother's love, specifically in this case. I can kind of get that as a mother. Probably didn't get it quite that much when I originally read this book, but a mother's love is kind of the ability to love someone enough to sacrifice your life for them is the kind of love that they're talking about. Voldemort can't experience that. He doesn't know emotions. And he's also split up his soul. Again, next book. So that's the prophecy. But again, it describes both Harry and Neville. So again, Dumbledore explains that Voldemort chose Harry because, like him, he's a half-blood. Because Harry's Tom Riddle, who Voldemort really is, father was a Muggle, and his mother was a witch. They were not in love. There was a whole love spell. There was a whole a bit of a story there with potions and love potions, and cautionary tale: don't use love potions. But again, that's kind of what's revealed at the end of this book. And you also reveal Dumbledore's feeling guilty that he really should have been involved, that he kept trying to protect Harry for all these years and trying to protect everybody, which seems to be what Dumbledore does. And now he regrets it. And Sirius is dead. And Harry's kind of still pissed off because at the end of this, when Dumbledore takes him to the office, Harry just destroys everything. He goes on a massive rampage because he's lost his godfather. Dumbledore has pretty much been distant the entire book and not really had anything to do with Harry. Won't talk to him, won't have a relationship with him at all after being this kind teacher who's been kind of training him for all these years. So yeah, Harry's pissed off. And Dumbledore has to explain this. And I'll do a whole lot of groveling and apologizing for what just happened, and then basically explain that Harry does in fact have to go back to his aunt and uncles because that's where his mother's blood lies, and that he still has a level of protection until he's about 17. So, which happens at the, I believe that starts the 7th book. Though I'm not sure, it may be explained in this book, but I think he does. So basically, that's kind of how this book ends. Sirius dies. It's very much revealed that the war has begun. So Fudge has to realize it because, again, basically he saw him. It's like, oh crap, he really is alive. I've been denying it, and he loses his job, I believe. I believe it's at the end of this book that he loses his job. And they get another Minister of Magic who doesn't last very long because, at the end of the next book, Voldemort takes over. So, that is this book as clearly as I can explain it. There's a lot more details. I don't like this book, so I don't know it in detail. It's very long, very, very long. Harry's a very irritating character in this book. He rants and raves and complains a lot and is a very sulky teenager. So, at 15. So, that is the end of this mess. Again, I don't like this book. So, it's also very big and very irritating. So again, after Sirius dies, this book ended up in my closet for a while before my sister borrowed it, lost the dust jacket, and then moved and found it again. So note to self, and this was a long time ago, don't lend your books to irresponsible older siblings. So that was before she had kids, because this book came out in, when did this book come out? This came out in looks like JK Rowling 03. So I would have been graduating from high school at this point. So this was my senior year in high school when I read this book, right before I entered college. So again, I don't like this book. It's probably my least favorite. From this point on, I do not read them in detail. They're very, very long. I will kind of get into book 6 and book 7 in previous videos. Then I will cover the films, which I know a little bit better. I own them. I actually haven't watched them all at home. I kind of got pregnant and miserable, and now I have a child, so I don't get to watch that kind of thing anymore. I don't have time. I'm either doing this or taking care of said child, so, and dealing with husbands and cats. So, but again, that's the end of this review. Again, this is Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, my least favorite book. Extremely, very, very, very irritating, highly depressing. Rowling has some issues and understanding teenage boys. I don't know much about teenage boys either. I married him. My husband was not a teenage boy when I met him. So I know nothing about teenage boys, and I've heard from other reviewers that neither does JK Rowling, which kind of makes sense because she wasn't one. But so that's the end of this. I will finish off the rest of the books and the rest of the films, and then we'll be done with Harry Potter. If you like this review, you want to check out the rest of my Harry Potter reviews, I encourage you to start at the beginning when I rant and rave about Rowling. I also have a bunch of other book reviews, film reviews, some homeschooling stuff, a bunch of other stuff. So if you want to see more of me and my homeschooling and my book reviews, like and subscribe. Thank you.